Welcome to Kaur Voices, and thank you for joining us in this amazing space. I just shared with you the handles to connect with us and contact us. Reach out to Kaur Voices on Instagram and on Facebook. Drop us an email, kaurvoices@gmail.com. This is our space to lift the taboos, have open conversation, and support each other. That is the purpose of Kaur Voices, and we need your support to make this space a success. Today, I have had a very special day, pretty hectic. I was multitasking, but there was something that made my day extra special. I had the opportunity to watch an incredible documentary, something that I had seen floating around on social media over the past few months. And because of COVID, I think the noise quietened down a little. So we have an obligation today as community to step up and support the amplification of this story. I want to tell you about it, but I want to show it to you as well. This is a powerful story. The narrative is amazing and it is based on fact and truth. The story of three sisters based in Vancouver who are talking to their Punjabi parents and with their children and their community about what they experienced within their family unit. And I am going to share with you the incredible trailer. So please enjoy this.
Our family was your typical Punjabi family. We kept to ourselves, but we're always up to celebrate an occasion with singing and dancing and eventually drama. When I was 11, that man came into our house. We were told, this is your brother, you respect him, and we gave him that respect. I was raped at 11 years old. Someone my parents trusted. I decided to come out because I witnessed something that this person is still active in abusing girls. And then my world shattered. My parents didn't suggest us going to the police. That was a step that we had to take on our own. We were small, tiny children who didn't have any exposure to any of this. We had each other. That's how we got through our childhood. Even now. Only 1% of women make it to where we've made it.
I cried watching this documentary. It really hit deep inside. And I am just so truly grateful for the Puni sisters to come forward, be incredibly brave and share their story. And I am even more grateful to the director, the amazing Punjabi woman who helped to tell this story with such cinematic excellence, and the storytelling was incredible. Baljit Sangra is a Vancouver-based filmmaker who runs her own production company called Viva Mantra Films. She uses documentary narrative and factual entertainment to explore social issues. Her film shines a light on underrepresented and marginalized voices and stories. She's a 6-time Leo Award nominee. Baljit's films have routinely premiered at festivals around the world, and her most high-profile project is the NFB-produced feature documentary Because We Are Girls, exploring the impact of sexual abuse on a family that had its world premiere at Hot Docs in 2019 and was the opening gala film at Doxa Film Festival. The film continues to be screened at festivals and winning awards around the world. And I would like you all to join me in welcoming Bajit to our beautiful Kaur Voices spaces. Bajit, welcome. And thank you so much for joining us.
Hi, happy to be here.
Do you hear me okay? The sound has changed.
Maybe put some earplugs in. I don't know.
Okay, let's try that.
Yeah. There's a lot of background noise or somebody banging outside. Hello? Is this better?
That seems a little better.
Okay, good.
Firstly, I want to say thank you to you for telling this story because it was so well told and just so incredibly deeply moving. So thank you.
Yeah, it was a real joy and a privilege and an honor to make this film. Um, yeah, it was quite the journey. So forever going to be grateful for the sisters and the family for trusting me in that space to tell their story.
Your sound's
And it's honestly,
a little bit muffled, Baljit. Sorry, we can't hear you that clearly. Something seems to have changed.
hello? Can you hear me now? It's better?
It's still the same. Sorry, we're just having a few technical issues. Can everybody hear us both okay? You can just give us a thumbs up in the comments if you can hear us okay.
Hi, is this better?
Yeah, there just seems to be background noise.
Is the earphones better though? Is it clear?
It seems to be the same.
You muted me.
Okay, I think we're good. If you guys can't hear us, just let us know. You can just pop into the chat and we'll try to fix things, but I think it's good. Baljit, could you give us a little bit of background on yourself and what got you into filmmaking?
Let's see, that's a good question. I think it's something I've always wanted to do. Even as a child, I was always sort of a storyteller. Um, daydream a lot, come up with great stories with my Barbies or whatever.
Wonderful.
Oh,
So,
okay. Is there a problem? Oh no. Okay, I'm back. Yeah, so it's but you just never thought that something like that could be possible, that you could make films, or it was always sort of a dream. But then I got into it in university, and worked in the industry, worked on other documentaries, had a TV series, and so yeah, in the last maybe 10 years or so, I've been really focusing more on representation, telling stories in our community. Because there's, I think we need to take charge of our own narrative, and I really feel like the representation, matters.
mm.
And
And
just, uh,
so filmmaking is not like a typical career choice for a young Punjabi girl. How did you come to that career choice, and were you supported by your family?
um, when you want to do something like that, you're really young and super optimistic, and I studied film at university, and my
Uh-huh.
parents were a little surprised that that was my choice, and not feeling that confident. It's such a they felt that it was such a big dream, that I needed to be a little bit more realistic. But
Mm-hmm.
I was able to work in the industry and support myself and get recognition on some of the projects that I had directed and done. So that gave them confidence, and the rest is history. Really, I think my mom was probably my biggest supporter and encourager of telling stories, especially in our culture. She really felt there was a lack of our stories being represented in the mainstream media.
Right. And that is the case. I mean, we're definitely underrepresented out there. What struggles did you have as a young female Punjabi filmmaker?
Um, uh, it's just the whole industry itself is challenging. So if you add being a woman and a woman of color on top of it, it definitely has its challenges. But I think if you keep at it, um, and there is an audience, hungry for our stories, and there's been a lot of successes, especially from the UK.
Mhm.
Um, like with Gurinder Chadha and uh, you know Bandit like Beckham and her films, were
Mhm.
super hits worldwide. So you could see that there's an audience for authentic stories from different cultures.
Right.
So, I think that really helps. And there's, you're seeing there was a lot like Blinded by the Light. There's been a lot of films,
Mhm.
narrative films, and of course, documentaries. So, now with Netflix, there's just so much content and Amazon and so forth out there. So, it's definitely been a challenge, but it's good. This is something we're really talking about now in the wider community, around representation, telling our own stories.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, I think that this is a really good time actually to be engaged in a creative medium like film or writing or music or anything. I think it's our time right now.
Right. So the film that we just saw the trailer for, Because We Are Girls, the film that I got to watch today, honestly, on in so many from every angle, from the sisters who were brave enough to come forward and actually share this story, for all of the lack of support that the community would usually offer. I think that they're incredibly brave, but the way that you told the story just helped to amplify the magnitude of the messaging. I loved the opening scenes. I loved how it was put together. I loved the whole thing, and everybody needs to watch it. So, everybody who's tuning in, the first thing you have to do at the end of the show is go to Amazon Prime and go and watch the documentary Because We Are Girls. That's the name of the documentary. And you guys all need to go out there and watch it and share it with your family and your friends because it's amazing. And Baljit, I want to ask you, what was it that made you choose this story to tell?
Um, well, it's a bit of an interesting story. I knew of, Jiti, who's in the film.
Hmm.
She's a friend of mine, so she shared with me quite a long time ago her story, that her and her sisters were survivors of sexual abuse. And she knew that I had done, documentary. And she said, have you ever considered this topic, for our community? And I said, well, that would be hard. What would the access be? And of course, that's when she told me. And we just sort of talked about it, and at some later, she did go to the police, and yeah, I was just engaged, with her telling me, and they hadn't told their parents that they had gone to the police, and obviously this was going to have a huge impact on their family. Eventually, when the file got looked at by the police and investigated, it was recommended for a preliminary hearing, and after that hearing, it went it was recommended to go to Supreme Court. So, there was definitely a story to be told. I mean, it's very, very difficult to make it to Supreme Court in historical sexual abuse case.
Hmm.
So, I heard it was only like 1 or 2% that make it that far. So,
Right.
yeah, and I think the blessing in this whole story of how this got made is, GT really wanted to share this journey with the world. So,
Mhm.
you know, that and was able to get the confidence of her family to also support it. So I think
Right.
that made the difference. And the National Film Board was approached, and yeah, we just filmed a little bit and put together like a proposal, and things were as they were unfolding. I was filming it, and eventually we got the full support of them, and then we got to make this film into a feature. But
Mm.
yeah, it really started with her and then her sisters feeling like, if we're gonna break our silence and go all the way to Supreme Court, let's do it for the greater good. Let's share it with everybody. And they allowed me in to that space to document it. And I think the fact that I come from the same culture and background. Um, I'm Punjabi Sikh, grew up here in BC. Um, I can really relate to the story and why they kept it a secret for so long. and what the stakes were in coming out and going public. And yeah, so a lot didn't have to be explained. I completely got it, and I understood their parents' response, initially wanting to shut everything down, or
Mm.
denial, or all of that. Like, I think all of us can appreciate that, because there's so much emphasis placed on family honor. Secrets are really suppressed. They're put
Mhm.
on, swept under the carpet. Um, and also just, the film also explores a lot of, I don't know, I try to give context, like in
Mhm.
terms of, growing up female, the pressure on the family to have a son. There were three daughters before the son came. Um, the parents, when they came, the immigrant experience, the parents came in the 70s, and they had a lot of pressure from their extended family, so sponsor us, bring us to Canada. So, and that's a really typical immigrant story too, right? You have a ton of people living
Right.
in your house, you're
Mm.
working, both parents are working, you have three little kids. Um, so your focus can really easily be dropped off your kids. You just hope that everybody at home is helping raise them.
Mhm.
And also in the film, I also explore, the impact of Bollywood films. That was really their
Mhm.
cultural source. You know what I mean? The girls loved those films. The films, would be shown in a small town on the weekend, and the films really provided a lot of fantasy element. And
Mm.
also I think it reinforced sort of the sexism that
Mhm.
in these films, whenever the protagonist, his honor was um, in dispute, or something went wrong, like what would happen to the heroine, right?
Right.
In these movies, she wouldn't be believed. She's begging for forgiveness. She gets rejected. She kills herself. And so, if you're a little girl watching these movies, and this is what's happening to the heroine when her purity, is being in question, I think that would really have an impact on you too, even in the back of your head. I know as kids, they probably got more caught up in the song and the dance
Mm.
and the drama, but also, what was expected of females. And that's really clear in those movies. So we're talking like the movies of the 70s and 80s. So
Mhm.
yeah, so that's also in the film. There's a lot of layers from, I use like family archives, um, just to tell that story that I think that we can all relate to. So it weaves the past, the present, Bollywood, and also through the whole film, there's this tension, this thread of them, taking their abuser to the Supreme Court. So I'm following that in real time and then kind of going back. So it kind of weaves, present and past and all of these things to give a greater understanding and context, and which I think a lot of people will understand. I try to
Mhm.
make it as personal as possible, and they say the deeply personal is also universal, right? And and there's a big climax scene in the film where they confront their parents for the wrongs of their childhood and not
Yeah.
supporting them, and it's all in Punjabi. It's very emotional, but we've
Yeah.
been showing it to people from all different backgrounds, and they can all relate to that of
Mhm.
not feeling heard, feeling misunderstood, be feeling blamed. The impact of shame, all of that. So it's really resonated with everyone. Um, yeah. So I really thought I kept keep it really personal. And
Mm.
personal is political too, because you could draw out so much from that and have a conversation. you
Right.
know and it's feminist. It's not like they're triumphant. They
Mm.
kept this a secret for decades, and for various circumstances that you'll see in the film, they decide to come out and pursue justice, and they kind of lift each other up in the process. So you see good days and bad days, and you see tears, you see you know uh, laughter, there's joy. So it's a real celebration of sisterhood too,
Mhm.
even in the midst of trauma. So that's really important too, that. And I think that you offer that space too, that we as a community need to lift our sisters up and be that sisterhood, especially, if they're coming forward with any of these issues, and are feeling not supported. Sometimes just lending an ear and believing someone, um, yeah, their sisterhood is powerful, and I think that's a real big theme. And even if you don't have direct sisters like they do, you know, we do have community, we have friends, there is community out there. And I really hope in the film, if people feel really emotional, or if this brings up something for them, that's something that they've maybe buried deep down for a long, long time, they feel, I hope they feel empowered to reach out, to get, you know, you can call a support line, you can reach out to, you know, the community, um, to your girlfriends, your sisters. I think it's important. I mean, we have to stop feeling the shame of this, because sexual abuse is not, you know, the victim's fault. So it's not on them, you know. That's how the abusers can abuse. They know that you're going to be quiet, right?
Mm.
And that gives them a lot of power. And the only way to kind of break that power is, you know, exposing that. And it's a hard journey, and it's not for everyone, but like, and not everybody has to take their abuser to court. Obviously, that's a very arduous journey. But to to I don't know, unburden yourself and just let that out, or cry, or share it with somebody. Because since this movie's been, you know, playing and traveling worldwide, and it's been in festivals, so many women and men have reached out to us and shared, um, that, you know, they too were impacted by sexual abuse, and, you know, thanking for the film and allowing that conversation. You can watch this film and have a conversation with your children, with your parents. Um, you know, we have to start having this conversation. It's important, you know.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So that's yeah, that's that's how I feel about it. Yeah.
It was, when I watched it, I loved the scenes that you brought in from Hindi films, and they did give that relevance. And I love how you wove them in to just enhance the narrative as well. Um, and yes, when the scene with the parents and the confrontation is happening, that was where I just wept. I just bawled because it was so powerful and so moving. Um, but we don't get that opportunity generally in Punjabi families, you know? So
Mm.
I think this is the reason that we need to talk about it more, because sexual abuse is a topic that our community has never had the opportunity to speak about. Women have always been told to just zip it and stay
Mm.
in the corner, stay in the shadows. And we've we've owned that silence in such a negative way that we don't know how to talk about our trauma. So now to see three strong Punjabi sisters up on a screen sharing their story and being so vulnerable and so brave to do that, it's, for me, as a Punjabi and Sikh woman, I'm just like, I'm stunned and I'm so grateful. I'm grateful for them to have told the story. I'm grateful for you to have captured it and brought it to screen, because that's not an easy job to do, to sit back and witness it all playing out. How was it for you to be on that journey with them?
Oh wow. There's no words really. It's so powerful. And um, you know, even like in that climax scene when I was filming it, I was standing, you know, right behind the cinematographer, and we only had one camera, and we were filming this, and, you know, I had just tears streaming down my eyes as I was filming it. So, you know, I was able to experience the highs and the lows with them. And, you know, it's definitely changed me. And I was able to do such a deeply personal documentary. So just even as, you know, a creative, it's huge. It's huge for me, you know, to kind of go there and,
Mm.
and do it, you know, with, love, you know. I really came at this film from a point of love, you know. And me and the sisters have often talked about too. We really feel that this film is kind of like our seva, you know,
Mm.
if that makes sense. You know, for the community, for the dialogue, for the love.
Mhm.
Uh, you know, it's making an impact. There's no doubt about it. We've had screenings where, uh, you know, really a mixed crowd, and then we've had screenings in the community, like where there's a large South Asian population, and say 90% of the audience are South
Mm.
Asian women. and you can feel the emotion in the room, you know, people crying, coming up to us after, just really feeling that that is my story. Thank you for telling my story.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, you know, that's what we really found out. This is so many people's story.
Right.
So, you know, in many ways, yeah, like I really get that could be my family. My I don't have sisters. I have two brothers, but you know what I mean. And those parents, I so get it, you know. And I think as a my process, it was really, you know, I felt the heaviness too on my shoulders of of making this film and putting it out in the greater community, because you know we also have to fight stereotypes, and people already have, you know, certain preconceived notions, especially about, you know, uh, um, yeah, people of color's culture, our religion. They don't know, you know, there's Islamophobia and um, you know, post 9/11, all of that sort of that's been out there. It's been like pretty heavy for people of color, right?
Absolutely. It's not been an easy
It's been
journey.
heavy on us, I think, you know, for sure. So then you're doing this film, and you don't really want people to walk away and going, oh, you know, that community. It's not. I did it in a way that was so personal and universal that it really crossed all of those kind of boundaries. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And but if you're the storyteller and you're telling a story like this, it does weigh on you, but you just got to be as authentic and real and connected and coming from the heart as possible. You know, I wanted it to be cinematic. I wanted it to be approachable. I wanted, you know, like, you know, strap yourself in. It's a slow journey, but it'll be worth it. Stay with this movie. And,
Mm.
you know, we go high and we go, you know, there's beautiful moments of joy, and then, you know, there's moments of tears. And, but there's in life, you know, not everything is dark, right? There's a lot of lightness in life. And these women have a lot of lightness. So I thought it was really important to share that. So it definitely changed me. And I think when we were shooting, when we were in court, I mean, the court process took a very long time because the accused, he kept trying to delay the trial and get adjournments because he really did not want the judge to hear their testimonies. So he made that very difficult. So while we were waiting for them to get their day in court, you know, the women's movement was really, you know, the Me Too movement, the Women's March, all of this was happening. And we're in court, and, you know, this could be a precedent setting case, you know, for other women, you know, coming forward. So we really felt the weight of that too on our shoulders. Like, you know, if you look around, this is like the women's time right now, you know, and even, you know, her parents are seeing, you know, people, very high profile people coming out and talking about like Me Too or, you know, uh, sexual exploitation. You know, there was even a conversation about this happening in Bollywood. So it became a really global conversation. So I think that really lifted the film up too.
Mm.
And that made it even more special to be part of a film in the middle of a movement that tackles some of this injustice, absolutely injustice, patriarchy, sexism, but also it's triumphant. So I think that's really important too. And I hope, I mean, I think just them doing this and confronting their parents and, you know, going after their abuser in Supreme Court of Canada, it's very feminist, you know. And I think, you
Mm.
know, in our culture, and I'm sure you share this a lot, if we really look at, you know, the the text, and you know, it's so progressive, but people often don't um, acknowledge that. You know what I mean? But Sikhism is very progressive if
Yeah.
you know, follow the tenets, right?
Mhm.
Um, yeah, and you know, we always just celebrate men coming forward with this word. You know, in this movie, it's really the women going, "Hey, I want justice," but that's very, you know,
Mhm.
sick me too. So, you know,
Absolutely.
Saint Soldier, you know, sometimes you have to stand up and go forward. So
Mhm.
I think that really was beautiful too. And it was nice to see the parents kind of sing that also, like
Mhm.
relating, you know, the father loved like the poet, Amrita
Pritham.
curriculum, and it's like, hello, look at your daughters and look what she's writing,
Right.
There's a connection here.
Mm.
And, Shahid Bajit Singh, and he would have, that, book on hand, or other, Hiranja, and like all of that. So the father, you know, grasp all that, but then you can also, like, look what's happening in your family. Like, look what your daughters are taking on. That's really amazing. You should be proud of it. So I think that I heard from them that that's really happening. People from the greater community have come up to the parents and said, you should be really proud. Your daughters have done a great service. This is a really important conversation that we're having.
Yes.
So
I
it's
think
been good.
in our community, we haven't had a chance. So in the whole South Asian community, we haven't had an opportunity to come forward with our own movement because there's too many cultural barriers that deter us, right? There's not being believed, just like some of the sisters had experienced, right? There's the shame from the family, the shame that we feel towards ourselves, the guilt, somehow feeling that, if you were a victim of sexual abuse, that it may have been your fault. It's never your fault. There was so many parts of it that were incredibly powerful, but I think I loved how it was put together. I loved that the sisters showed their strength. They overcame that challenge and just the sheer barrier of breaking the silence. And it was another Sikh sister that stood with them to tell the story behind the camera. And I think that's how we come together as community. That's how we make movements become powerful, when we show up for each other. And that was the role that you played. You helped to hold it and weave it all together. So thank you for doing that for us. I want to ask you, as a filmmaker, at the beginning of the film, Jiti said something about breaking the cycle, right? And I just wanted to ask if you could explain a little bit about what that term meant to you as a producer, and how did you add those elements into the documentary to help us connect with breaking the cycle?
Right. Yeah, what is the cycle, right? Is silence, and keep perpetuating that
Mm-hmm.
system of like you said, shame and honor, and internalizing that, so you're quiet, and if it comes out, you put it under the carpet.
Mm-hmm.
The family are like, who's going to marry you? What will people think of our family? All of that, that's already happening.
Mm-hmm.
So, and also, will you be believed in? And sometimes, you're not believed, right? They will choose the perpetrator, and sadly, often the perpetrator is somebody very close to the family, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you know people have taken their sides, and the families are just divided, so that's pretty heavy. But I think having their daughters in the film was important. That was sort of obviously a big motivation of doing this for them, of breaking that cycle, to protecting, the girls and their family, and also being a role model for their own daughter. So there's scenes of Jiti's two daughters are in the film, and one was in elementary school, one was in high school at the time, and I kind of use them in a very poetic way. You have to
Mm-hmm.
watch the movie, and it could be seen as them. They could be seen as representing innocence. They could be seen as representing the sisters. However, whatever comes to the
Mm-hmm.
viewer's mind. But it's sort of done, poetically. But but then it gives the sisters time to also reflect on their experience. Like GP says, when I was born, my father didn't come home for like 2 weeks because another daughter was born. And then
Right.
you see that voiceover on top of her daughter, getting ready, and putting on bracelets and things like that.
Mm.
So, and then there's a scene too before they go into court for the verdict, where all the sisters are there, the daughters are there, and GP's husband's there, and they just sort of huddle as a family. And one of the daughters says uh, that she's learned to stand up for what you believe in.
Mm.
After GT and Kira and Selekshana, they talk and, just trying to getting the strength up and feeling the love in the room. But, one of the daughters says that. So that's everything. That one line is everything. So that's how you can break the cycle. And I really thought having those elements in the film was really important, because it is about the next generation. It's healing ourselves, but it also is about the next generation. How do we stop this? Right? And the more we talk about it, the more we take the stigma off of it, right? Like,
Absolutely.
And I had experiences when we had the opening film. We opened a pretty big documentary film festival. One of the, I don't know, like the third largest in Canada or something like that. And it was in a really big venue, 900 seats, and we sold it out. We were the opening film. And there was a lot of, it was a really mixed crowd, but there was a lot of Indian people too that came out, and women came up to me, BB that I didn't know. They had tears in their eyes and they just hugged me. And, it was kind of like this film was for them too. They definitely obviously had a harder time or no chance of speaking their truth. So it's really like, we really feel the lineage in making this movie, It's honoring our mothers, our grandmothers, our great-grandmothers, all of that, to have a voice. So
Absolutely.
that's really in the film. I think that was sort of, you see the generational aspect in the film, but also that was sort of the motivation in making it, because you keep thinking like, just imagine what could they have done, if this happened. You have absolutely no power, none, right? I mean, they were able to come forward. They're supported. They have good jobs. They're older. It was obviously would have been much harder to come forward. Like 20 years ago, right? So. But, when you think about, I heard the mom's story, just like how she grew up, and there's a bit of that in that story, like how her and her father met, and they lived in the village, and he had to marry really young because the mom wasn't well, and all the other sister-in-laws had moved out, and that sort of life, servitude and obedience, and, But in the film, you see too, she was really happy that, in her relationship with her husband, when she met him, she said, "Oh, when I saw him for the first time, I thought he was
very
so good looking and all of that." But just that imagine being in the village and being alone and so much responsibility. And even the husband said, when he recalls back, I took her out to the fields one day and I played her this song because she has no time to hear music. She's busy, to just, and then that was a mom's experience, and their daughter's experience is so different. And then you have the next generation is in the movie too. So we already see 3 generations, of expectations and change, and it's beautiful.
And whose decision was it to have the parents in the film?
Well, I always wanted the whole family, because I really think the impact of sexual abuse impacts the whole family. You know what I mean? It just does, right? Secrets and lies have an impact. So we filmed, with the parents. It was just the whole process. Like, we filmed off and on for almost 3 years. So it was a slow process. A lot of, I had gone to their house, I just chatted, got their whole history, just talked about their experience in India, how they met, how, the father's experience was in Canada, how he got his first job, racism, like everything, just to kind of understand them and share that. And then to kind of share that your story is so many people's story. And even, the story of, what happened, the impact, that's everybody's story too. That's very common. And there's no shame in that. But it was a really, nice, slow process. So I think when we had the climax scene, the parents had brought news to me and the crew, and they gave us that window, and we're really real. It was really hard to cut that scene, to be honest. I put it in 2 bits. We've come out and you come back in, because it's so powerful. And, about 80% of it is in Punjabi. you know.
Right.
Then that's when you can sometimes speak your real truth. The parents are speaking Punjabi, and you're, you know, sometimes the English things are lost in translation too, right? It
Mm.
was really from the heart, and then you can see the yeah, just sort of they're kind of like a little bit of this, the tension, you know, and how to go through that. But the fact that they had that conversation and they're working on that, and we're all a work in progress, right? Every day we're alive,
Mm.
we're a work in progress. And the
Mm.
fact that they, you know, allowed themselves to be in this film and trusted the process, trusted me. Obviously, they trusted, you know, their daughters. I have a big debt of gratitude for them for sure, and a lot of love and respect. And
Yeah, because I mean, for
yeah, and
most of us, we can't, like, I couldn't imagine having that sort of a conversation with my parents, even now, you know, it would be it would be frightening just the thought of it. So to know that not only were they brave enough to be able to have the conversation, but the parents were able to sit through it and they allowed you to be there to film it. I mean, in my mind, I was like, I was scared for you. Like, what if they'd have just yelled at you and told you to leave, or
yeah,
like,
that
what
could
if
have
they
totally
had?
happened for sure. Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Mhm.
yeah. But it's also that when that scene was filmed, they were coming close to the end of the trial, so tensions were building. You know, and maybe they felt on this journey not supported, you know, right, and not being heard, and
Mm.
so it's also when we film that in the sort of the trajectory of their journey. Um, that's why I think they were able to kind of get to that place of emotion and frustration and the parents, because you know, uh, yeah, no, I'm so blessed to be able to capture that, and then it happened the way it did, because I think everybody can really relate to that.
Yeah,
Maybe not everybody can relate to sexual abuse, but can definitely relate to not feeling supported, not feeling understood, um,
or
you
being
know,
silenced.
being silenced, and then how it impacted you. You know,
Mm.
like one of the sisters talks about, you know, depression and feeling like, you know, you're making things worse on me, and I could barely breathe. You know, so I think so many people can relate to that, right?
I
And
definitely, I mean, I
yeah,
think this is what humanizes the whole narrative because it's not about politics, it's not about society, it's about humans and a family.
hmm
And it's a
hmm
family dynamic that we get to peer into to make that human connection and see that, you know, this is not easy. It's very complicated. It's really painful and really difficult, but it's so important to talk about. And I think that from what I received, that was like a huge, huge message. But what was it that you wanted to say to the viewers? What was the lesson that you wanted to give through the documentary?
well, I mean, obviously to take the stigma off of any shame and just have more conversation. You know, I think so. Like a lot of times, people feel like our community is not ready for these kind of conversations, and I often get that from, well, um, mainstream media too. Like, oh, you know, how's your community handling this? Or are you getting any backlash? They already assume it's going to be so difficult and a challenge, but it's not. You know, I think we did something. It was really honest. It was really true. It was really from the heart. So, you know, we did get some people obviously saying some comments back, whatever. But that's okay. That's going to happen. But overall, the impact, our community is ready for this kind of conversation. Really, we are. Because do you want this to be passed on to the next generation? No. And were some ways that you were brought up, and would you put that onto your children? You know,
Mhm.
if you had a choice. Do you know what I'm saying? Like,
Right.
there are people, you see the parents now, they're really watchful of where their kids are at, or, you know what I mean? They're just not just trusting every single person in their extended family with their child, right? It's different, it is changing. Um,
Mhm.
you know, parents are having conversations about good touch, bad touch, or, you know, all of that, yeah?
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
I didn't have that conversation growing up. So, I think it's changing, so I think we're ready for that, and I think other generations like the BB parents generation, older generations, they kind of want to talk about this too.
Right.
Um, and they want to just talk about the struggles, if not sexual abuse, sort of like struggles of having to, uh, sponsor everybody, the struggle to, having no choice in who you marry, the struggle in, the difference between how a boy child is treated and a girl child, the struggle
Mm,
of, only females and no brother, all those kind of things that all impacts you, right? So
absolutely.
yeah, and I think it, when you have this kind of conversation that can be really cross generational, we can understand their struggles better too, right? And their lack of choice,
Hmm.
and and they can understand. They need to understand where we're at, right?
Hmm.
And if you ask them, do you want some of these things to be passed on to the next generation? They would say, absolutely not.
Right.
There's no way. So you have to say, well, this is how we change things.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So that's the hope. And what was really awesome was when we had screenings, somebody would come, and then I would see them at another screening. I'm like, oh, I just saw you at, like a couple days ago. You already came and saw the movie. You're back. They're like, I brought my mom, I brought my sisters, I brought my husband, or like that really touched my heart
Hmm.
because then they saw it as a family and they talked about it, and it's a really good segue to even to get histories of your parents of the older generation,
Hmm.
because I think they will really relate to the parents in this film and say, what
Absolutely.
was your story like? The thing in our community is when you ask the older generation, the pioneers in the way, they came in the 70s and the community was still small at that time, and a lot of people, taking any jobs they could get. They were spread out all over BC in small towns, working in the mills. BC has a very different sort of settler history, but nobody asked them those stories,
Hmm.
and
Absolutely. I mean,
they're beautiful stories, and they need to be heard and they need to be appreciated because you're kind of benefiting from that. You're benefiting from that struggle and what they went through. Like this generation, they came over like at 18, 17, 18, 19, you know maybe not even speaking English, trying to, they would live together in these bunk houses, a lot of South Asian men, they supported each other.
yeah,
You get a job, try to get me a job. Like all of this history is super important, and there's
absolutely.
so much struggle in those stories. And what about the women? They had to work and they had to look after all these kids and all the people that are coming and send
Mm,
money back to India, like all these pressures. And they're like 18, 19 years old. Can you
right.
imagine carrying that on your shoulders at like 18, 19 years old?
It's
That's
right now
pretty
for us.
heavy.
Yeah, it's unimaginable. And I think that this was like a really special and powerful part in the film where the mother's realizing the reality of those choices and how
Mm-hmm.
did this predator enter the household. And it was in
Mm-hmm.
that process of being supportive to the community, being there for other people, and
Mm-hmm.
not realizing the price that she was paying through her own daughters.
Oh,
And
yeah, absolutely.
that just hits really deep inside that, you know, the people that we should fear the most, they could be very close around us. And it's often what happens. I had a wonderful guest last week, a sister who's also from Vancouver, Gurpreet Kaur. She runs the core movement. And one of the things that she highlighted to us was that most of these incidents of sexual abuse take place in the family with people that you trust, that you welcome into your home. Um, and have trust for them. Let
Mm-hmm.
them have access to your children or to your, the vulnerable people in that environment and not bat an eyelid because we would never think bad of them. And as you said, we're now entering a different space of time where that veil of silence is being lifted. And the incredibly brave, beautiful Puni sisters have opened that segue for us to actually step forward and not feel ashamed and not have to hide back into the shadows, but come forward, claim our stories, and seek justice where possible, right?
Oh, yeah, no, absolutely. Um, yeah, that's why I really wanted the family, multi generational, because we need to have this, be in this space to share and understand. But you also look too, like, again, there's these stereotypes about Asian cultures that I don't know, like, we're so, the women are more submissive or obedient, and the culture, people are aware of honor killings and stuff like that. But also, there's such a history of resistance too, and standing up. I mean, it was so horrific what happened in India with Jyoti Singh, the young girl who got, assaulted so badly and murdered on a bus. But after, Delhi was shut down, man. There were so many protests all over India. Women all came out, and the mom went to the media and she's like,
Right.
say her name, Jyoti Singh. Like, that was incredibly brave. And that's India. Have you seen anywhere where that many women have come out and just almost like...
But the sad thing is, it still hasn't stopped. I mean, after that incident, there were still so many more.
But the people are coming forward, though, and saying, I want justice for my daughter. And, I was hearing more and more stories. So I see that, we're trying and it's changing. But there is such a history, too, of Indian feminism, resistance.
Right.
Absolutely. And sometimes, like, the mainstream world, the white world, they don't acknowledge that. You know what I mean? So
I think there's
that's kind of important too.
It's a huge cultural disconnect. Whether the wider world can't understand why it would be so difficult for South Asian women to come forward with their stories. We've had so many decades of suppression. It's taken us almost 100 years to get to a point where we can actually use our voices. It was one thing after another, after another, after another, that our communities have endured and suffered that created that culture. And it wasn't easy for the women to hold that within themselves. We could see that as being submissive. We could see that as being weak, to stay silent. But I think it takes a whole lot more sometimes just to hold that within yourself and try to operate in a normal way. I think that takes a whole other level of bravery. But
absolutely. I absolutely agree with you.
We have to take the lid off it now. We have to talk about it. And, filmmaking is an incredible way to get our stories farther and wider so that we can get seen and we can feel that, our stories are being told, which is why we're so grateful for the work that you're doing in filmmaking. What sort of a response did you get after this documentary came out?
Yeah, we've had really positive response, really emotional response. People reaching out to us, sharing their story. We would I'd say we had a screening, and women would come up to us and say, this movie needs to be seen in this community. Say we had a screening in Surrey, which is a city in the Lower Mainland. And they're like, this needs to be seen in Abbotsford. And I'm like, sure, make it happen. Boom! They got an auditorium. They got the tickets. It's full. It's incredible. Like, you have the mainstream sort of, not mainstream, we had the festival circuit, and we did so well because we opened the film. They had to add so many extra shows when we launched in Vancouver, and we were the premiere film, that the theater downtown Vancouver booked our show for 8 shows. A lot of them were sold out. A documentary. They're like, hey, we need this in the theater, and people were coming. And I was like, oh my God. And then other screenings, and we showed it in Williams Lake, where the girls grew up, and where the court proceedings happened. And we sold out a theater. They had to open up another theater. And I thought, okay, it's probably going to be a lot of Indian people at the screening. No, lots of really mixed screening. A lot of white people, a lot of people, Indigenous people. It was incredible. Yeah. Wow. So we've had that, and the community has organized screenings. It's been really fantastic that way, and I hope it continues, because it's an important film, again, to discuss many of the things that we've shared today. But you can have resources available at a screening so people in your community know where to turn to, right? You can have an interesting panel. They showed it in Winnipeg. some women reached out to me, and they were, in PhD feminist program, Punjabi Sikh women, and they sold out the place. And they had an incredible panel about gender-based violence in the Indian community and breaking silence. So, in Toronto, they had this screening, an incredible panel. Like, we weren't at that screening, but they put together again to touch these issues, and women of color on the panel. Not just Indian, and just because this is a big struggle worldwide for all women, right? There's no question about it, and so you can watch the movie, but you can really jump into having these kind of conversations. It's a real good leaping point. I think these are really important conversations to have. So I so appreciate the time that you've given me and the platform. Thank you very much. And I really hope your audience watches this movie and keeps this conversation moving. I mean, how do we create change? How do we have dialogue? How do we broach a difficult topic like this? Watch the movie and have a conversation with your kids.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And with your parents, and ask your parents, well, how do you feel about the movie, or how do you relate to the parents, or what do you think of these girls coming forward and doing that? And yeah, and the perpetrator, like you mentioned earlier, when there's been studies around sexual abuse, it's often somebody so close to you that's won the trust of the entire family. Let's have that conversation. What would you do? And yeah, it was really, there's a lot of layers. It's and the cast of characters grew in this film because I think there's so many perspectives that are important.
Right.
Parents, I think the brother's perspective, growing up, the son, the important son, and and sort of like what did that feel like? I felt, the daughters, Selectiona's daughter, she talks about, now I understand why my mom, had so many anger issues. So sometimes if you don't disclose, you know what I mean? Like, you're wondering, like, well, why is my parent depressed? Or why are they getting so emotional? Or there is an impact of secrets and lies, right? You put it somewhere in your body, and sometimes that obviously it affects your mental health, and it can affect your physical health, right?
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
It'll manifest somewhere, this sort of like
100%. Yes.
100%. So when the kids, and they can handle it. So in the film, she's like, now, and her daughter was so supportive of her mom on this journey. She would get her outfits ready and get her ready, and she came up to the verdict, and they have when you open up and share that secret, you can have a closer bond too, right? So that's really beautiful. Yeah,
I think that's so powerful. We are coming to the end of the show, and before we get to the end, I would love to show another clip from the documentary. But before I do that, I want to ask that for the movement that you've begun now through this amazing documentary, what other work would you like, or do you endeavor to do in the space of creating awareness of sexual abuse in the South Asian community?
What work? I mean, obviously, I'm not a sociologist, or you know what I'm saying. I'm a filmmaker, and I'm putting out something that resonates with a lot of truth and heart, and I made it really cinematic and approachable, and it's felt like narrative vibe as possible. So you're not just like, oh my god, this is too heavy. It opens with a beautiful, drone shot of a young girl riding her bike, over a Bollywood tune,
really
and then
beautiful.
slowly. So I've made it really approachable and cinematic, because it's everybody's story, and we need to share this story. And screenings, and just finding if resources that are available, or women's groups that are supporting women's groups, can use this film as an impact tool. That would be amazing. I mean, that, like, films can bring impact, right? Social impact, just to start the dialogue. You can show the film and do a fundraiser. You can show the film and have a panel. You can show, like, I want social impact. That is the motivation of me being a documentary filmmaker. It's the motivation for me to sharing the stories that I do share. So I want, like, create a space to share some truth, and be, have some impact. But there are resources out there, right?
Right.
You know
Yeah.
that, I'm sure, and you highlighted many on your shows. So maybe the film can help their work too. You know what I mean? There's a study guide. It's available also for schools, and it comes with a study guide. So it's the producers of the National Film Board, NFB.ca, and so you can look for resources, but they're using it in schools and colleges. Here's some topics of conversation. Yeah, and it's all word of mouth in the community bringing it out, right? Like, we lucked out because we got a good press and everything here, that all these amazing community screenings were happening and panels were happening all across Canada, and I hope there's more, but it's important. And it's also, when we screened in Williams Lake, I really thought there'd be a lot more Indian people who'd show up. It wasn't. Me and the sisters were like, oh, I think there's like 10. Why is it sold out? All these other people came out, and it's a lot. You feel their love, but they can understand that journey. They appreciate that journey. They know that journey. They've been on that journey, and maybe in a different way. But yeah, I think, I really want to create sisterhood, within our community and with other communities. We're all in this together, right? Sisterhood is powerful. Yeah, and there are so many like sisters out there that are doing amazing work, for our sisters, right?
Absolutely.
And yeah, I hope this is of use to them, because I really admire the work that they do. I'm appreciative of their work, and if I can contribute in any way, that means a lot to me.
Oh,
That motivates me.
That's amazing, and I think that support is incredible. That's how we grow. And for me, this is a call out to the whole Kaur Voices community, everybody who's listening and watching and tuning in, to reach out to Baljit and support filmmaking, especially Punjabi female filmmakers. We need to support them. vivamantra.ca. Viva Mantra Films is the production house, and you can find them on Facebook and Instagram. The link is in the comments. So please go and support. And we, before we wrap up, are going to switch to another clip from the documentary.
Quest for a son. We grew up in a small mill town in northern British Columbia. Our family was your typical Punjabi family. We kept to ourselves, but were always up to celebrate an occasion, with singing and dancing, and eventually drama. The best day of my life was getting married and leaving my family, my hometown, and a dark secret behind.
Wow. That just is so powerful. And the reason I picked that particular clip is because I want to announce next week's guest. And it is with so much joy and excitement that I would like to let you know next week in Kaur Voices, we will have Jeeti Puni with us in this space to talk about her experience as a survivor. Thank you, Baljit, for making that connection for us, because it's such an honor to have somebody so brave come forward and help us to figure out how do we navigate such difficult situations, and how can we bring some light into those spaces as well. And with that, I would like to thank you. We're so appreciative to have had you today on the Kaur Voices show. And I hope that you'll be back with more films that we can talk about, celebrate and share in our community. And everybody who missed it, the documentary is called Because We Are Girls. It is available on Amazon Prime, and you all need to go and watch it now, as soon as this show is done. And please share it with your friends and your family, because we all need to see this film. So, Baljit, thank you so much from the bottom of my heart for making this film, for showing up in sisterhood, and just doing great work and being here today as well. Thank you so much for being on Kaur Voices.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. Thanks for this.